All right. I'm going to set my timer.
All right.
Oh, hey, all right, I need a half-hour time keep too. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me again this year. Always a good group to get together with you guys going on in, well, a number of years now. It used to be that we'd get together in some small rooms and bring a projector and put up the display board and kind of go through what's going on in the year. So today I'm going to give an update from the ministry side of things. So OMAFRA, for those of you who are not familiar with us, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. I work on new crop development, which hops falls under my portfolio. Traditionally, I give a bit of a market update, import update, acreage update at the meeting here. Today, I've got more slides than I expected when we were asked to give the presentation. The reason, Melanie Filitas, my counterpart who does pest management, unfortunately she can't be here today. She's actually preparing for and traveling for 2 other meetings this week, but she did provide me some slides that'll go through the virus survey that she did in 2017 and some downy mildew management things to be thinking about for this season. I've also got some slides from Kathy Baker and Asifa Manouar from the University of Guelph. They're working on the downy mildew forecasting project for hops and some other work as well, so I've got some slides from them. So, buckle your seatbelts. We're going to do a very whirlwind tour here of kind of a lot of different information and data. The slides that I will be presenting, we're going to break these down into the 3 separate presentations. We'll get it up on the blog, and I think we're going to try to get it on the OHGA website. I'm happy to take questions during the presentation, but we might want to keep them to shorter questions just for time-wise. Longer questions maybe at the end when we know where we are for time. So I'm going to start off with the market and acreage stats that we normally go through. In the past, I've always presented this information more in a table format with a lot of numbers. Getting to the point now, so I've been tracking this each year, collecting these numbers now for 7 years we've got data for, which is kind of nice. We're starting to get a bit better perspective of what's going on. And so I'm putting all of this now into more graphical format, hopefully a bit easier to see the trends of what's happening. So for 2017, our total hop imports, you can see here again have increased from the previous year. We've got around 41.5 million kilograms that we're importing into Canada. I used to show the Ontario import numbers, but it was about 2 or 3 years ago, I started showing just the total Canadian imports because our Ontario numbers just show the imports coming into Ontario. Does not mean those hops are staying and being used in Ontario. They can go anywhere within the country. So that's why I'm just showing the total Canadian imports, because hops coming into other ports in other provinces can make their way to brewers here in Ontario as well. So already a question.
Sorry, I think you misspoke. The top line looks to me to be dollars.
Oh, sorry, you're right. So, I'm glad you caught me. So, sorry, 41.5 million Canadian dollars is the value. Our import volume in weight is 1.88 million kilograms. So almost 1.9 million kilograms of hops for a value of 41.5 million Canadian dollars. As you can see, 2014 to 2016, we really saw some big jumps in imports and value. In the next few slides, you'll see some other jumps in that same time period, both on markets and acreage. So what does this all mean? Kind of some application take-home points as we start looking into some of this data. Well, I would say yes, some market opportunities still exist. If we look at, we're still importing, we're increasing the total volume of hops that we're importing. So yes, on a local side of things, I think we still have opportunities there for markets, growing our markets. However, this is at a bit of a decreasing rate of volume. So yes, we're seeing some more increasing rates in the past 3 years, but this year it's increased, but at a decreasing rate. So where that goes from here, we don't know, but I think there's still some opportunities there in capturing some markets locally. When we take that total volume of hops that we import into Canada, this is, I think, really a neat slide when we see the percentage of the format that those hops are coming in. So obviously, traditionally, pellets, which is our top line here, has been the biggest part of our imports. Back in 2011, 94% of all of the hops we were importing were in pelletized form. We've now decreased steadily, right now to 2017, to around 77% of all of the hops that we import are in pellet form. Leaf hops, which is our bottom line here, kind of staying fairly flat. We did see it for a few years. It popped up to about 6 or 7% of the total hops that we were importing were leaf hops. We're back down to 2%, which is our pre-2013 kind of average in that 1 to 2% level. So leaf hops, whether that's because we're actually supplying more leaf hops here, brewers are purchasing here and they're not purchasing from external areas, might be a reason. Maybe just there's some other factors there. Maybe one brewer just decided not to import and use a lot of leaf hops this year. There's different possibilities on that. We don't know why that is, but it still continues to be the smallest part of our market. The biggest trend, though, that we've seen is the resin products, which we have seen steadily climb each year for the last 7 years. We're now at a whopping 21% of resin products that are being imported into Canada.
Is there a particular source of region those resin products are coming from?
I have that data from last year. I don't have it in here this year, but I think that's a good point that you're bringing up, that we should see where it's coming from. Majority of our imports come from the Pacific Northwest, and then I do think Germany is our second biggest hop supplier. In what format? I don't have that off the top of my head. I do have access to some of that data. Yep.
Questions for you.
Okay.
One, it looks to me like the total import remains the same. The brewers are moving the resin away from pellets. I can almost see that there.
Yep.
The other thing I can't see is the volume of beer produced.
We'll get to that.
Thank you.
So that is, and that's, again, a component to the whole story. I've got a number of slides here. I've got 8 or 9 graphs. No, it's good that you bring it up, because I'm glad you're thinking about that, because that's important for the whole story. And that we're just aware of what are the market trends here. But I do think this is something that we really need to be watching, because to my knowledge, there's nobody in Ontario doing extracts or resin products, and yet it seems to be capturing a much larger portion of the market of everything that we're importing. So is that a trend that brewers are wanting that? It's a considerable change. Yep. So that's something else that I do have the numbers. I haven't looked at them yet. I actually just got this 2 weeks ago, so some of the updated numbers. So I can break that down for you in the slides that we post online. So good question. Yep.
Is that craft or just all beer?
This is all beer for hops. This is total hops coming into Canada for all beer. So application to this slide. Pelletized hops continue as the primary format. Resins continue to capture market share, so just be thinking about that, you know, yes, pellets are king, but resins are really starting to increase that market share. Leaf hops have dropped just in this year, kind of back to historical levels. Why that is, because of import replacement, because of what we're producing now in the province, we don't know. There could be other reasons as well. Okay, so question about number of breweries, volume of beer. Yes, Don?
Just a quick observation. I think, I'm not familiar with the resin itself. I think it's supercritical CO2 extraction.
There's 2 formats of resin. There's the CO2 extraction, and there's, what's the other one? It's gone off the top of my head.
Yeah. So I'd be interested to know if you've got access to the data, whether something different is happening with the big brewers than the craft brewers. Because I suspect that resin is being used by the
larger brewers,
not the craft brewers.
Right.
And getting some sense of that would be helpful.
Can everybody hear the discussion that's going on here? No? So the comment was made, if we can find out where that resin is going, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to find that information. That we might have to go to the brewing sector to see if they can find some of that information. But the comment was made, it would be nice to know where those resin products are being used. Is that by the large brewers? Is that by craft brewers? And percent-wise of craft brewers using the different hop formats. So, good point. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. This slide, I usually just show this green line here. So let's focus on that first. This is the axis for that. This is our average price per pound of our imported pelletized hops. So I've always plotted to show what the price of pelletized hops that we're importing, what the average price is that we're paying. I forgot to put the data points on here, but in 2017, this is the first year that we've gone over the $10 a pound average price that we're paying for imported pelletized hops. So you can see there's that general trend up in price over time. What I have not accounted for here, and what I'm hoping to do over the next little while, is to look at this based on inflation rates as well. Because what we were paying at, say, $5.50 a pound, $5.75 a pound back here in 2011, what is that in respect to today's dollars? Yes, Nicholas?
Is it possible, and maybe a lot of data sets to have to look at, but also do a comparison of the spot market and or surplus market that exists with a lot of breweries, because that's, in fact, going to be counter to what we're seeing there.
Right, yeah, and so that's something, I don't know where that data exists or who has that. It would be neat to look at some of the new, more online exchange forums and track data by cultivar and by location, whether that's Canada, Ontario, organic versus conventional, and the price for year-old crop, 2-year-old crop, 3-year-old crop. Things like that would be really nice to know where the prices are falling out. And beyond what I can do at the moment, but maybe with my summer student we can do something like that for next year. That would be really neat to see. And there's endless things that you can do with data if you have access to the data. So this is just trying to give you a general overview of where we're sitting with the market. This is the first time I've also plotted this, so I just want to see as we're increasing our average price, going back to volumes of beer produced. This is not volumes of beer. This is total number of independent breweries operating in Ontario over time. And I find this really, kind of looking at your supply and demand, obviously as we've had more breweries each year, and 2017 was a record year for both bricks and mortar breweries as well as contract breweries, which that's what I have outlined here. So the black lines are the bricks and mortar breweries, the red is the contract breweries, and these are breweries, independent breweries operating in Ontario. So I don't want to read into this too much because this does not include the big guys, and there's probably other factors there too. But general trend is we've got lots more demand. General trend is prices are going up for the imported hops. Interesting to see that imported hops being at that $10 a pound, that would be the low end of any of the hops that I know being sold, local hops being sold in Ontario. Our average, it seems, in talking with people is kind of in that $14 to $16 a pound. There's the odd ones, depending on the cultivar production system, you're above $25 a pound. But I have heard of hops being sold locally under the $10 a pound price point. So just gives you an idea when you are talking with the brewers themselves, so kind of the application point, potential to discuss with brewers about those increasing prices that they're paying for imported hops. Well, if they can get the same cultivars, good or better quality from our local growers, they might be paying a little bit of a premium, but I think there's still, again, opportunity to make that marketing point based on some of that import data. Okay, So that's kind of the import data that I have summarized for you right now. Going on to acreage estimates, in the last 3 to 4 years, I've been trying to coordinate acreage estimates by province with the other provinces to present to you guys here. I used to break it down by province, now kind of getting past that point. I would say the two provinces that have the best estimates or best feeling is Ontario and Quebec. Part of that is because here in Ontario we have the OHGA, which really is helpful in estimating our commercial acreage. And we also have people like Melanie and I, so extension reps, that are in contact with growers on a regular basis. So we have a better idea of what's going on, what's being established, what's the ongoing commercial acreage in the province. Likewise in Quebec, they seem to have similar type of connection with on-the-ground industry. The rest of the provinces, I normally have to work through the individual minor use coordinators who may only be in contact with growers once or twice a year, and it would be the main growers in the province. And they're trying to give me an acreage estimate for their province based on kind of not as much interaction as what we would have here in Ontario and Quebec. Yes?
Just speaking with the chairman of the British Columbia hop growers, he is grading this type of information. He's contacted, there's actually hop growers, there's a hop grower in Saskatchewan, there's hop growers in Manitoba,
yep.
and so he's integrating this information to, I guess, feed into this. So there's some associations that are starting to look at this to see what the trends are. So
right,
you might be contacted, or other
That's
associations
great.
are to find this information.
Good. All right. So general trend, at least in the last 3 years that I've been kind of trying to track some of this by province. Obviously in Ontario, in our red bars, we've been going up. 2017, I think we were around that 200 commercial acres. So again, I'm trying to classify this as commercial production versus hobbyist. Over half an acre or more than 400 plants in production. Canada acreage, so this would be the total of the acreage based on what we're getting from all of the different provinces. So in 2016, we're kind of at that 400 plus around the 400 acre mark there. This was also the first year that we had any hop related data on the ag census. And so this is where, in the past, I've mentioned that it seems like there's some under-reporting in Canada-wide acreage, particularly I think in BC is the big one that we're really missing a lot of that data from in the past. This is the ag census data. This is based on write-in information from growers. So growers actually have to write in that they are producing hops and what the acreage is. In 2016, we were at, I think it was around 765 acres that was recorded by the agriculture census. So far cry from our 400 acres that we had estimated by the various provinces. Interesting though, I think I had this estimated around 175 acres for Ontario, and the ag census showed that Ontario write-in numbers were around 176 acres. So we're about 1 acre off there. So not bad. I think that's doing pretty good. That goes to show you guys that you're doing your job, you know, kind of tracking acreage, see how it's growing. Okay, so application. Increasing, thinking we need to just take home point here as we move forward. Increasing acreage across in Ontario, increasing acreage in Canada. I think there's some under-reporting in regions, as mentioned. Okay, acreage in the Great Lakes region. So we do have data from our surrounding Great Lakes neighbors, which I've outlined here for the last 3 years as well. The three big ones I wanted to point out that are really increasing acreage in the last year was Michigan, New York, bumped up, and Wisconsin. For comparison, Ontario and Quebec are right in this area here. So in that 150, 175 to 200 acre kind of region. But you can see Michigan being that big player. They've got around 800, just over 800 acres in production. New York at 400 acres. Wisconsin really increasing in the last 3 years from around 25 or so acres up to over that 120 mark now. So Take-home point from that slide, increasing acreage in all of our surrounding neighbors. Changes in the Pacific Northwest, so biggest growing region in the world based on acreage and production within the continent here. I've got data back to 2010 here. Since 2012, again, harvested acres by year has been steadily increasing. Big shift though, what I've marked here, back in 2012, it was about a 50-50 split on acreage in aroma versus bittering varieties. Now their acreage is to a 20-80 split, 20% bittering, 80% aroma varieties. So the largest hop producing region in the world based on acreage, big, huge shift towards aroma varieties. So just again, keeping in mind of what are some of those market and industry trends. This is from the USA Hop Statistical Report. This is their top 10 varieties grown by year in the Pacific Northwest. So again, Cascade, Citra, Simcoe, Mosaic, Willamette would be the big aroma varieties. And then, yeah, the others would be the bittering or Columbus, CTZ, I'd lump those together. Chinook, Summit, be the bittering. But as you can see, across the board, Cascade has been #1 in acreage and just seen increases in those aroma varieties each year.
What was the graphic?
Oh, that's just, so the proprietary varieties. So what we're seeing, kind of those increases in what Simcoe, Citra, and Mosaic. So those proprietary varieties, we're really starting to see, so they were barely on the board here 5 years ago. Now we're starting to see those as kind of within that top 5 kind of range.
Those are licensed.
That's correct, yep. Some of them are trademarked, some are licensed, some are proprietary, some are registered. There's different legal aspects to each of those methods, but generally speaking, those are hop varieties that we do not have access to grow here in Ontario. Okay, so takeaway again from this slide, increasing acreage internationally and from the largest growing region in the world. Same thing in Germany, which is the second largest producer of hops in the world right now, also increasing acreage. Okay, so we look internationally, not just, we talked about locally our acreage increasing, we talked about nationally our increasing acreage. We talked about our Great Lakes region increasing acreage. We talked about the Pacific Northwest on our doorstep, increasing acreage. International acreage from the International Hop Growers Economic Commission. What I've plotted here, green lines is, the top number is the hectares. I've put that in acres here for you since 2013. Our black line represents our aroma varieties. The red line represents the acreage in alpha varieties or bittering. So again, same story that we've seen across the board, increasing acreage in all of the member countries. I think there's 14 member countries in the IHGC. Same trends as what's happening in the Pacific Northwest. Big shift towards aroma varieties, decreasing acreage in the alpha varieties. So it just goes to show you kind of that whole big picture of what's happening in the markets here. Application, there's a lot of acreage going in, not just here, but all over the world. General shift towards the aroma cultivars, and of course, in the next 2 to 3 years, I would expect we're going to see a lot more hops available on the market. So the question I would put forward is, what is that going to do to prices? And what is that going to do to us as a local industry here in the province? What kind of outward pressure is there going to be? Yes?
So what can your organization do to give us mitigating strategies? And it's great to tell me prices going up, prices down.
Yep.
But how do I address it? Can you help?
That's a good question. That's a very in-depth question. And I think that's something, some of what we'll talk about today, from my side of things, Melanie and I work on production aspects. I'm trying to give you an overview of the market that you're operating in so that for you at the farm level, what are you going to be doing, making decisions going forward in either expanding or not in your acreage? What types of varieties are you going to decide to put in? We do have information on funding programs later on in the presentation here that you'll have access to if you decide you want or need funding for something. Also technical production information, which that's what Melanie and I's mandate is within our positions.
So who helps with marketing strategy and group contact?
Most marketing is done at the farm level, but you also have the OHGA here as your marketing association. Okay, all right, so I'm, check my time here because okay, I'm gonna really have to speed up here. Anyways, want to give you overview of what's happening because we need to stay on top of what's happening, not just locally but internationally. So this is just a summary slide, basically everything I've already talked about. The two main points I do want to caution on, again, acreage in all regions going up. You know, be aware there's lots of acreage going in when you're planning the next few years of your own business. The other thing is I showed the data on the increasing number of Ontario breweries, but I do not have the volume produced by those independent breweries by year. That will give us a much better and clearer picture of what is really happening in the marketplace and whether or not we need to be expanding acreage to meet those new volumes. Because we can say we've got a whole bunch of new breweries, but total volume production could be the same as what it was in the past. They might all just be producing less per brewery. So that's the piece that I don't have yet. I'm hoping that we can get some of that information for you.
So does the Ontario Ministry of Finance have released that to you?
We get most of our information from Stats Canada. We've had a very difficult time getting brewing information from anything provincially, even ministry to ministry. It's sometimes like pulling teeth and trying to find the right person with those numbers. So I think looking at this information and now from what I've been able to gather over the last 7 or so years, that's a big missing piece, and I think I need to try to find it. That's right, yeah. So they've got it. It's just how do we get access to that? So, fair enough. There we go. Maybe our association can do that. I'm giving you more work. Okay, so I'm going to shift away from the market piece. I'm going to put one slide here. It does have multiple graphics, though, on the big production challenge that I had calls about, and I think that we all recognize from 2017 in review. That was rainfall. So, what I've got up here, the accumulated precipitation across the province for the growing season around April 1st to September 11th is what I've put on these charts. You have access to these charts too. You can play around with it as much as you want. Timelines, dates, locations. This is all on Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Drought Watch site. And it's updated regularly right through the growing season. So you do have access to this information. This is basically the year in review, something that I think we're all pretty much aware of. If we look at average precipitation across the province, on average, we'd be looking at in a normal growing season around 500 millimeters of rainfall of accumulated precipitation during the growing season. The light blue areas here would be in that 475 to 575 millimeters of rainfall. Green is less than that, and as we get into varying shades of darker blue is where we get more rainfall during as accumulated precipitation in that time period. The two regions really hit hard, Eastern Ontario, Ottawa, Cornwall area, Bruce and Grey counties, even Prince Edward County. It's not really showing up here as much on this particular map, but also hit fairly hard last year. They were showing, in some cases, up to 800 or more millimeters of rainfall during the growing season. The issue with that, of course, is that it doesn't all come when we need it. It comes probably at the worst times. It has implications both on plant vigor because of saturated soils. It has implications on management, being able to get into the yard, implications on pest management in terms of moisture, humidity that may influence downy mildew, powdery mildew, and other disease issues. So this is our departure from average. Sorry it's not showing up very well. This is a little bit better idea of what's happening, so how much more or less are the regions getting. You can see a large part of the province, which is this dark purple, is getting more than 180 millimeters more than we would in an average growing season. So considerable amount of precipitation. And then this is the final graphic, which I think really tells the story. This is your percent of your average precipitation. And in Eastern Ontario, Prince Edward County, Grey Bruce area, we were getting anywhere from 150 to 200% of our average precipitation, so double the average precipitation we would in most years. In some cases, particularly right out near Ottawa and Cornwall, and right up here, right on the border between Grey and Bruce County, we saw record rainfall amounts in 2017. So, what's this all mean? I would say of all the calls that I got last year on hops, calls, emails, information requests, I've divided out that about 70% of the calls that I get, those are people interested in growing hops. So daily basis, getting people saying, I want to grow hops. The other 30% were growers who are already growing hops. They have some kind of technical question that they're looking for. Out of that 30%, half of them talked about it. The reason they were calling was because of the rainfall that we were getting at that particular time in the growing season and what they were to do about it. So the issues related to this, or the takeaway story from 2017, I'd say site selection and soil type, really important. When you're looking at expanding a hop yard or planting a hop yard, making sure your site selection is right because of years like we had in 2017. You're wanting to avoid those really heavy soils. And if you've talked to me in the last 8 or 9 years, if you've been putting in hop acreage, I normally say try to avoid those clay soils. Some people say they're going to grow on clay anyways. I say, okay, it can be done, but hops don't like wet feet. And in a year like this year, if you were on clay, even a loamy clay or a clay loam, people saw huge issues. We had some growers completely write off their entire acreage this year. We've also seen from research trials done in Ohio, 2 different hop yards where one was a clay acreage, one was a sandy loam acreage. They did see over replicated trials over multiple years. Every year on the clay soils, you do get less yield than you do on the lighter soils. So be aware of that. If you're looking at expanding, make sure site selection is on your mind because of years like we had in 2017. Tile drainage can never hurt. Doesn't matter the soil type, tile drainage can always benefit crop production. And of course, after this year, and even during 2017, there was a few growers that made the call that they're going to put in tile drainage in their hop yards. Increasing organic matter really helps during the times that you're getting inundated with rainfall, helps for infiltration of that water and not necessarily just runoff over the area. It also benefits for other things like your crop nutrition. Yep. No, so most of our tile drains go in at 3-foot level, so 36 inches. When you look at research done on hop excavations of hop roots, yes, it can go down as far as 100 centimeters, so a meter in depth, which would be about 3.5 feet or so. But the primary rooting zone is actually only down to about the 2-foot level. So those minor roots that do make its way down to that 3+ foot level in the soil shouldn't be an issue. There may be cases where it could be, but generally speaking, no. In the US, a lot of the tile drainage goes in deeper than 3 feet. Most of the time, a lot of the regions in the Great Lakes region, they're putting it more in at 4-foot levels, but they've actually seen issues putting that in. Our water engineer who looks after tile drainage, she said they've been experiencing lots of production issues when the drainage is in that deep. So the 3-foot level, that seems to be the standard within Ontario, seems to hold true. That should be okay for us if hop production. Yep, right.
I think if your tile are working properly, you're not going to have a lot of water laying in the tile anyways.
Right.
So there's less incentive for the roots to want to work towards the tile.
Good point. Good point. So the technicalities on the actual rooting zone there. I do want to point out, though, irrigation system. In the past, you've heard me flogging, you need to have an irrigation system in place. Even in our average rainfall situation in Ontario, hops require more water for optimal production than what we get in an average year. Even this year, in the areas where we're experiencing 700 to 800 millimeters, that would be basically the bare minimum of crop requirements. The issue this year is that it was coming at times when you didn't need it, or it was just relentless where it just kept raining. So we weren't necessarily getting the rainfall or getting the water when we needed it for optimal crop production. So yes, we still need irrigation systems, even comparing it or thinking about years like 2017. If you think about just 1 year back, 2016, we had some record dry areas in the province. So 2 questions here.
Quick question. Is there an average number of how many mils per plant per day for water?
Yes, I've got that all online. There's different reports, different research papers that have given kind of different outlines. And I've outlined it on total volume per acre. I've outlined it on per plant basis, all of that. So I do have kind of, depending on the report. On the On Specialty Crops blog, the OMAFRA Specialty Crops blog, has that all up there. Implications for 2018, so going into this year, based on all of that extra rainfall from last year, I think we might see reduced plant vigor, especially if it was washing out nutrients. We weren't, in some areas, not getting the sunlight or proper crop production, proper amount of photosynthate production in the plant to then regenerate the plant for this year. So I think just be aware of that. You really need to be on your fertility and management right from the get-go as the plants start coming up this year, because I think you'll see some issues from all of that excess rainfall last year and potentially less sunlight as well during the season. Increased incidence of disease. Probably going to see some major issues with downy mildew because 2017 was probably the biggest and most challenging year that we've seen for downy mildew in the province. And I do have a summary of information from Melanie coming up. Okay. So, if I'm going to get through all of this, yes, I'm going to keep going. I might, as I said, I might glaze over a few of these next slides. It's just to bring it to your attention, programs and some future production considerations. We'll get all this online. Of course, you can call or email us anytime. We'll do our best to get back to you. Okay, the Advanced Payments Program, which lists hops as a storage crop. Now we're going into the 3rd year. This is a federal program for anybody wanting a loan for the production season. So if you're selling your hops over time, and this was a trend that we talked about last year about more farms putting in cold storage so that they can start selling their crop through the season, because we can't all sell everything as soon as it's harvested. Sometimes people do tap into this resource. The advance rate for hops in Ontario this year for the 2018-2019 season is $6.79 a dry pound. That actually holds from last year, same price. When the program was first introduced, and this is for all horticulture crops and field crops, we have individual crops listed for federal government has it listed out by crop. for any storage crop. They publish the rates every year. So the rate that it was introduced at when we first got hops listed into the program was at $4.95 a pound. So they have upped that to $6.79, but they didn't change it for this year. Advances are available April 1st. Repayment deadlines September 30th of 2019. If you're interested in this program, the delivery partner in Ontario for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is the Agricultural Credit Corporation. So you'll find all of the application information, all of the contact information on their website. So they're the delivery partner in Ontario. There's a different delivery partner for each province. Another program, you're probably familiar with Growing Forward 2. There is Growing Forward, which is a 5-year federal, provincial, territorial program. We then went into Growing Forward 2, which was from 2013 to 2018. Those programs are all now coming to an end. Our new federal, provincial, territorial program is called CAP, the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. So basically, what this is, new 5-year program, similar structure as GF2, just a new name. This is all of your cost share funding for any kinds of cost share programs that you're wanting to use on the farm. So there's 3 different streams. It's all of the oversight in Ontario is by OMAFRA, but we do have delivery partners for accepting the actual applications because it would be too much for us to look after with our staff. So for all of the producer programs, cost shares, and applications, you would go through the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. For any processors wanting to apply to the funding, you go through OMAFRA. And most of you, when we talk about processing, the meaning there is a transformation of the product. So if you're doing pelletization, that's a transformation of your product. So you do classify as a processor if you're doing any on-farm processing. So you have potentially 2 different streams of money there or programs that you can access. The third one is the organizations and collaborations. So this would be one probably more at the OHGA level. That would be looking at doing projects and getting some cost share funding. Most of the time it's a 50-50 split on the costs for the orgs and collabs, but you can get up to 75% if it's a novel project. Now, just so you know, the organizations and collaborations information, this is now open. All of the information is available. You can start developing your projects and applications. The producer and processor streams are not yet active. If you go to the OMAFRA website, it'll send you to the OSCIA website. If you go to the OSCIA website, they'll send you back to the OMAFRA website. It's a big loop right now because the programs haven't been released. Welcome to government. So anyways, just so you know, those 2 streams are supposed to be around the beginning of April. So it's actually a couple weeks away. Those streams should be coming out and available. All of the applications are merit-based. You might remember back, I think it was the first Growing Forward, where a lot of it was first come, first serve. Everything is now merit-based for all of the proposals. If you're looking for general information, you can go to the OMAFRA website for general information right now, or detailed information for the organizations and collaborations, ontario.ca/ag-partnership. Okay. Trends. I don't think I'm going to have much time. I'm just really going to highlight these next 2 slides quickly. I do normally like to mention some general trends that we're seeing, whether that's with hops in Ontario or more sector-wide, looking more at horticulture production, agriculture production. Last year, this is where I talked about cold storage for hops and how more producers either were heading that way or thinking about putting in cold storage. I think from any of the discussions, any of the meetings that I go to, what I hear people talking about, food safety and traceability is really something that we need to be thinking about for hop production. It's in all of the other horticulture sectors. Food safety is more of your overarching assurance system so that you're not causing harm to your consumer. This can be everything production related, processing related, so whether that's your irrigation water, hand washing, equipment maintenance, sanitation of your equipment, storage area conditions, containers, processing and packaging rooms, all of that relates to your food safety and assurance to your consumer. The traceability side is really when you get more into the documentation side of all of this. And it's basically allowing you to track everything that has happened to that product as it's been produced before you hand it on to the next person, so your buyer. So it really does come down to documentation for future reference of your inputs through your outputs. There is a benefit to doing this. Yes, it can be time consuming. Yes, it can take a lot of effort to start a traceability program. But the benefits from it that we've seen from other horticulture producers is that it helps them streamline their system. They can identify the efficiencies or inefficiencies in their production system. So ultimately, it does help your bottom dollar on the economics by doing this. But generally speaking, there's a lot more going on in terms of food safety and traceability within horticulture and within agriculture. So I think it's something that we need to start thinking about, especially since we're doing a lot of on-farm processing, direct-to-user processing in Ontario for our hops. Food safety and traceability, I think, relates into the discussion on quality. Quality is the other thing that keeps coming up. Anytime I talk to a grower, hop growers within Ontario, they talk about how do we brand or market on quality, how do we increase our quality. There's lots of different ways, whether that be having, discussion came up at the OFBC about having an external business or group or association or government do quality assessments of the raw hop product. It could be through aroma appraisals, it could be through resin testing, so that's, again, the documentation side of it. It could also come down to how do we, as an association or Ontario growers, the OHGA could put in, our growers strive for quality because they grow cultivars that are available, so they would say, these are the types of cultivars. If you find a grower in Ontario selling Citra, you might want to question that. It could be that OHGA growers strive for a certain resin range based on the cultivars that they're growing. It could be that OHGA growers strive for using a certain best management program. So it could be using Canada GAP for food safety and traceability. It could be that everybody within the OHGA has an environmental farm plan. So there's lots of discussion, there's lots of ways to define quality. I'm not gonna, it's a big discussion. It's been years that this has come up, but I think it still is something that we need to be thinking about. Other countries do have protocols set out for assessing what they call quality, whether that be through subjective or objective means. But anyways, I wanted to put that out here as a trend, and how do we maybe filter in the food safety traceability part to quality as well. Okay, going on to some less technical things. We did have the hop session again this year at the OFBC. The speaker session, we had about 75 to 80 people in the speaker session, so that was a great turnout. We brought Joris Cranby from Belgium in to speak on the production side of hop production in Belgium. He's also has an on-farm brewery, so we talked about his brewery as well. We did have our grower panel. We did focus in more on organic hop production this year, basically mainly because a lot of the calls that Melanie and I get are of interested growers are all interested in growing organic hops. And so we wanted to present the challenges and opportunities from our current growers in the province and try to get some of that information out to those who are interested in growing hops. We also had our 6th year for the Great Ontario Hop Craft Beer Competition. which you can see down here. Our head judge being Michael Legas, and we have 8 judges there going through we had a total of 18 entries, which is the maximum amount that we can take into the competition. A total of 16 that showed up. We did have a few changes this year, but do want to congratulate VQH Farms. First place partnered with Great Lakes Brewery. This year's beer style was the Black IPA. Can Aussie Farms and Elora Brewing Company, second place. And Clodowig Farm and Brock Street Brewing, third place. So again, a good fun forum to highlight Ontario hops, highlight Ontario beer, and give an area, a forum for some relationship building between our growers and our brewers here in the province. Okay, now I'm going to shift. Where are we at here? I better 5 to 7 minutes. Oh, okay, Melanie's going to be mad. I'm going to talk about pest management and some of our project updates here. Okay, so some difficult things to talk about here. So the virus survey 2017 and downy mildew update. I'm going to have to go through this, some of the preliminary stuff really fast to be done on time. So this will be all up there. Melanie's going to be doing more detailed reports, but there is some pretty significant findings that we had here, both 2016 and 2017. So if you remember from Melanie's presentation last year, these are all of the viruses and virus-like diseases, so our viroids that are documented in hops. This is just documented in hops internationally. The ones in bold here are the viruses that we have documented in Ontario. Hop latent viroid is one that, I need to get my notes here because Melanie outlined these because I'm going to miss some points. I'm sorry, I thought I had forgotten I didn't get these out. And it looks like I don't have them here. So I'm gonna wing it. As I said, Melanie will be going over this in most likely in more detail during the HOP IPM training, which will be scheduled for April. She's also putting together the reports for this. Anyways, the ones in bold here are the ones that we do have documentation in Ontario. The 3 that you see listed here in the red box are considered the Carla viruses. They're grouped together, similar grouping of viruses. Apple mosaic and hop stunt viroid would be the 2 others that are much more severe or serious issues. Apple mosaic virus, she went through all of this last year. We have a lot of this up online, so I'm going to probably go through these quickly. Characteristic oak leaf pattern. It's kind of hard to see in the lighting here, but that's pretty characteristic of apple mosaic virus. And before the question comes up, apple mosaic virus in hops and apple mosaic virus in apples does not cross. So if you have an apple orchard close by, you do not need to fear apple mosaic virus that is in apples. They are similar viroid, different strain. They do not cross infect. At least that's the understanding right now. So I better mention that. Often though, for apple mosaic virus and most of our viruses, there's often no visible symptoms. You're actually just seeing it in reduced vigor, reduced yield, reduced alpha acids. Same thing with hop stunt viroid, stunting or delayed growth, fewer laterals and cones, paler foliage. But again, you're typically not seeing symptoms for 3 to 5 years after establishment, and that's when all of a sudden you start to see real reductions in your yields and plant vigor. The Carla viruses, those 3 that I mentioned grouped together, often, again, no visible symptoms. If you do see symptoms, it's typically in this yellow mottling pattern that you see here. And it's hop mosaic virus that you're most likely to see causing those symptoms. But again, often there's no visible symptoms of virus. in hops. So transmission. Only the Carla viruses, those 3 that we talked about grouped together, are transmitted by insects, particularly aphids. All of the viruses are mechanically transmitted. So thinking of with your equipment that you're going through for management. But hop stunt viroid is particularly prone to spreading in this way, and especially in the spring when there's a lot more juice or sap within the new plants as they're growing. There's much an increased risk of transmission of hop stunt viroid at that point. All the viruses can be transmitted through propagating material as well, so rhizomes, plants, all of that. Be aware of that when you're sourcing plants. The impact, again, as I mentioned, all of the viruses can potentially reduce yield and your alpha acid content. Hop stunt viroid has the most significant effects, followed by apple mosaic. Kind of categorized here with, can't see the chart there anymore. Okay. 2016, Melanie gave an update last year on the virus survey. Generally speaking, it was just basically to determine if we have virus in Ontario hop yards and are the symptoms that we're seeing attributable to any particular virus. The methods were target sampling within a lot of different yards. I think there was 26 yards and about 3 targeted samples. So we were actually looking for plants with symptoms. This was not a randomized type of sampling process. Generally speaking, this is how she categorized the data. So east, northeast, central, central west, and west. The survey results from 2016. 100% of our hop yards tested positive for at least 1 virus. This we saw this all last year. She presented all this last year. Greater than 50% of the samples were infected with more than 1 virus. So kind of a bleak outlook. I hear you had a bleak outlook this morning as well from your growing hand. Conclusions from 2016, most suspect symptoms were confirmed as being due to virus. Most hop yards had at least some plants with hop virus. So since it was a targeted survey of specific plants that were showing symptoms, it didn't really give us the overall incidence of virus that would be present in our hop yards because we were looking for plants that looked like they had virus. So it didn't really give us a better idea. So in 2017, Melanie was able to get some more funding to do a randomized collection of plants for virus testing across yards across the province. For methods, she was sampling 15 to 20 plants in 8 yards across the province, selected randomly. It didn't matter if they had symptoms or not. And she also narrowed it down to 3 main varieties that she was sampling from: Cascade, Chinook, and Centennial. There was a few of the yards that didn't have Centennial, but generally speaking, those were the 3 that she was looking for. And all of them, she had tested for the genetic test for viruses. So what did she find? What you'll see here, this is the total number of samples, and this is our percent of all plants sampled that showed a particular virus or positive with virus. So unfortunately, overall there's a high level of virus in our hop yards, what we're finding. So if you look at the total number of samples showing positive for at least 1 virus, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 8 yards, 100% of samples tested positive for virus, whether or not they showed symptoms. Most of that was largely due to the presence of the more common Carla viruses, which you can see here, the percentages of all plants sampled. Unfortunately, again, the most serious viral diseases, hop stunt viroid and apple mosaic virus, had lower incidence, which is good, but there were some cases where we were getting 100% of the samples showing incidence of those more severe diseases, or viruses, sorry. Yards with the lower incidences of virus, so when you're looking at some of these yards that were in the, say, the 45, 68, or 10% virus, that was because they had sourced clean plants to begin with, or as clean plants as they could, so they really checked out their propagators. The other thing is a lot of times those yards are newer yards. So the ones that you're seeing with higher infection rates are either yards that did not source clean plants or they're older yards. So over time, you're going to see an accumulation of transmission of virus. Oops. Okay, here, take-home points. 77% of infected plants had more than one virus. So if we look at total percent of infected plants, most of them had more than one virus, so 2 or 3 viruses here. You can see the percent of infected plants. So 44% in, say, yard 1 would have 2 viruses. 22% of the samples had 3 or more viruses. 51% of infected plants had 3 or more viruses. So again, pretty staggering levels of virus that we're seeing in hops.
A quick comment. When I first heard the presentation, Ken last year.
Ken Eastwell, yep.
So he was talking about mechanical transmission. He said chlorine does not work. He said you have to use something called ammonium chloride. Now I tried to find it, couldn't.
Okay.
And so I don't know whether there are best practices there. If this is insinuating that, we all talk about putting plants out stuff.
Right.
But step 1 is just
sanitation is a big one. Yep.
So how you do that for viruses is not, I think, a trivial issue.
That's right.
Maybe it would be good to get some advice.
And so that's a good point. Melanie has a slide in here. She's also going to be doing some more information. This was talking about transmission of viruses and how we can minimize that going forward. How long for time? Am I over?
Oh, yes, but just, if you can
okay. I'm going to leave the rest of this to the report. Melanie is going to be putting this together in a report. Take-home points. We've got a lot of virus, but also it's not so bleak because the thing is, this is pretty new stuff that's to be surveying for viruses. Most of the hop production regions internationally have no clue on the amount of virus. This is pioneering work that Melanie's doing here. They're starting to look at this in Michigan as well, across their yards and other regions. But the work that Melanie's doing here is really highlighting the problem. Yes, it's highlighting a problem here, but this is an international hop issue because the material that we're getting is shared by growers, is propagated across borders. So, management, start with clean planting material where possible. Look for propagators who frequently source from the clean plant network and strive to keep plants clean prior to sale. So not just during the process of propagation, but also in the holding process before those plants go out. Testing plants for virus prior to planting wherever possible. Of course, economics, cost of doing that can sometimes be an issue. Minimize your aphid populations as much as possible for reducing the parvoviruses. Contact with basal growth is a major factor for spread, particularly in the spring activities, as I mentioned. If you're a conventional grower, there are some contact herbicides we now have registered rather than doing mechanical stripping. It might help reduce some of that transmission. Clean equipment before moving between your yards and remove severely infected vines when you see them. Okay, downy mildew update. I will do this because I think this is going to be implications for this coming season. So, rainy conditions in 2017, optimal for downy mildew. Very difficult to control with our organic products. A lot of our organic growers really struggled in 2017. Many growers did lose much of their crop. Some of the conventional growers also had crop loss. Others had acceptable yields as long as they were on their rotations for fungicide applications. They did have to see that they had to tighten up their rotations or their application windows. So they were putting on more sprays in 2017, which again does cost more, but hopefully is a trade-off in the economics of yield. The main pattern observed in most of northeastern North America was that most of our conventional growers in the surrounding regions had losses if they did not use all of their control methods. But those who did use cultural methods plus their chemical methods and frequent spraying, they did have minimal losses in 2017. 2018, so implications for this year. Yards with high levels of systemic infection may have higher levels of basal spikes. So again, getting out into the yards early and watching for those basal spikes. Early spring scouting management practices are going to be really important. Remove and destroy your infected buds or shoots. Lots of discussion around whether or not you should crown. If you had severe systemic infection last year, it might be worthwhile looking at crowning this year. That will affect your crop vigor and yields not only this year, but also 2 to 3 years ahead, but it could help reduce the severity of the downing. And then, of course, continual removal of disease shoots. Early spring Ridamil applications are important because it does show some systemic activity. However, there is some possible resistance, but there's not enough data to show this yet in Ontario. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to the University of Guelph's project update because of time. They are looking at both Ridamil and Aliette resistance in hops in Ontario. Ridamil is registered on hops right now. Aliette is not registered, but we've had a lot of growers asking for it. The issue is we want to first find out if there is resistance to Aliette in hops in Ontario because there's documented resistance in other jurisdictions. And we don't want to go to the effort of trying to register a product that already has resistance because it's going to become ineffective anyways. So that's kind of the situation with Ridamil and Aliette right now. Okay, so removing extra basal foliage as soon as possible. After training this spring season, minimize your moisture content in the yard, mowing your cover crops right away, stripping and removing at least that 1.5 meters of foliage. That will not affect your yield based on some work that we did a couple of years ago. And avoid your overhead irrigation. Continue removal of basal spikes and regular fungicide sprays starting once temperatures are above 8 degrees Celsius. Reminder, the fungicides are protective. They are not curative, so they need to be applied before the infection occurs. She does have some rotations for both the conventional and organic products. She does have this online already. She's also going to be doing some more blog posts in advance of, well, a couple weeks as we get into the growing season, just so that everybody has access to some information there on some spray rotations for both conventional and organic products. Okay, I'm only going to show the one slide from Guelph, and then I'll finish it up. There's 10 slides of data here that the university folks sent me, but I'll only just quickly review. This is a project that is funded through OMAFRA, University of Guelph partnership. Many of you know Kathy Baker and Asifa from the Simcoe station. They've been out to a number of yards across the province the last couple of years. Right now, there's four main goals to the projects that they're working on. It's a 3-year project. Evaluate an existing downy mildew forecasting model for use in Ontario hops. So that would be a predictive model that you could go onto a website and see where we're at and see whether or not you need to tighten up your rotations for fungicide sprays or what is the potential for incidents in downy mildew outbreak at that particular point in time of the season. So that's some pretty cool work that they're doing there on that modeling. They're evaluating differences in hop cultivar susceptibility to downy mildew at the same time. So our strains of downy mildew here are different or sometimes different than what they see in other growing regions. So when you see a recommendation for certain hop cultivars being downy mildew resistant from the Pacific Northwest, may not be resistant to the strains of downy mildew that we have here. So again, some really practical information that they're recording here for susceptibility to our cultivars to the downy mildew in this area. They're also testing, as I mentioned, for resistance in both Ridamil and Aliette, and they're evaluating biological and organic fungicides for the control of downy mildew and cone diseases. So again, that's I think they've got 8 or 9 products, organic products, that they're evaluating efficacy on that we could potentially look at for registrations in the future for organic producers. So unfortunately, I can't go through all of this, but there's Kathy's and ASIFA's contact information. They do want to thank collaborators that they've been working with, whether it's putting up weather stations and other things in those hop yards to do the modeling. They do thank the OHGA as well for their support, for your support with this research. It is OMAFRA University of Guelph, but it's also funded in part by the OHGA. If you have questions about the research, you can call or email Kathy or ASIFA. You can also call or email Melanie or I. And there's our information. And I'm sorry, I know I wanted to Also, I'll mention another project that Melanie has been working on with some other pest management counterparts in the Great Lakes region is this hop scouting pocket guide. So as you guys know better than anyone, the pest complexes that we have here in Ontario are different than what they have in, say, the Pacific Northwest, where we get most of our pest management information from. So Melanie, along with Aaron Lizotte from Michigan State and Aaron Hodgson from Iowa State, have put together this pocket guide for pest complexes for scouting in hop yards for northeastern US and eastern Canada. So I have 100 of these here today. They are free. What I do ask is, for today, if we could do one per farm today, and then once we have stock of how many, we do have a few more that we've kept back that Melanie's going to be using during the IPM training and things like that. But if you want to take one, please take one, put down your name that you've taken one, or your farm name, whichever, just so that we know. But if we could limit it to one per farm today, and then if you do want another one, give us a call or email. We'll get another one out to you once we know how many we have left over.
Okay. Thank you, Robert.